Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Whether you are a construction company or do-it-yourselfer, you start your projects with A.G. Hines Company. They're located downtown Knoxville on Hines Street. They're also in Blunteville if you're watching this on YouTube or up in East Tennessee. Gordon Hines and his family, it's 4 generations that have been working there at A.G. Hines Company, and Gordon and his family who are there now are just really, really good people. The term salt of the earth is kicked around too often, but if there's anybody that I would describe as salt of the earth kind of people, that's them. Fantastic. I couldn't be happier about having them on this show, and I think you wouldn't be happier than going down and starting your project with A.G. Hines Company. I promise you, if you've ever done the big box store stuff, you're going to go to A.G. Hines Company and you're going to see the difference immediately. aghines.com. All right, Josh Heupel said this week that Tennessee has really good people that handle everything that goes into the recruiting process. Our personnel side of it, what we're doing on the high school side of it, and the portal side of it. But he and Danny White have both said, well, with revenue sharing coming, we all act like it's a done deal. Schools are already spending revenue sharing money.
Right.
Cool. Hope this judge goes ahead, and she delayed it the last time. But they say if revenue sharing is coming, we'll have to take a look at this. Maybe that changes. My question is just a lot of people out there, they look around the SEC and they see that you're one of 4 or 5 schools that doesn't have a general manager.
Exactly.
And they say, why don't you have one? We wouldn't have had this bad off season if it hadn't been for your lack of a general managership. My question then, Tennessee needed a GM, and we've talked about this, so hold off. Does Tennessee need a GM?
I'm going to go with yeah. I mean, you go back in NFL history, and there was a time when they didn't have GMs, and most of the head coaches acted as their own general manager, and there was a lot of resistance, but you go through the 70s and 80s, and then that virtually disappeared except for a couple of big names, one of which we may even talk about later. But GMs in the NFL became a thing, and every team has one because it worked. And I think in college, it probably is going to end up working. Now, some of the GMs that have been hired, I don't quite understand why schools went the direction. Can't think of the Raiders' name, Crosby. He is a GM for his school. So, yes, I will say they need a GM.
Yes, I think you do, because you look at how much, I think Bob hit on it, how much college football is more like the NFL now. I mean, it's changed that much. Look at Josh Heupel last year. You mentioned you get ready to play Ohio State. He can't even really concentrate on the playoff game coming up because of all this turmoil going on within the program on NIL stuff.
Well, you would think for all we know, he's got people that he just said he trusts these people and they're handling it.
Well, yeah, but who would he bring in that he trusts outside of his comfort zone?
Well,
is another
okay,
thing.
I would hold
and
off with that.
That'll be later. But yes, you need one with so much more going on to deal with, and talent evaluation would be part of it.
We got 5 people to talk, so everybody needs to.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't guarantee that everything is going to work out, but maybe it helps with some of the public stories that have come out where the Ricky Gibson case, which ended up being worked out, but the Nico situation wasn't. Yeah, so I think part of that comes back to the perceived drama that can surround it. From December to the spring, you can't keep every story from coming out, but a GM can help with that, can help with talent identification, financial side management. There's a lot that can go into that position.
So, yes. You don't think it's necessarily a fix-all?
It's not. Well, for one, who would he hire if he hired a GM? Would he promote from within? Because I think there's a real chance he would do that.
Yes,
if he would go out and hire a guy.
What's the difference?
Yeah. So if you're giving the title to someone who's already in the building, it doesn't really change anything. And are you giving them full power to control all roster decisions, or are they still just deferring to Josh Heupel at the end of the day?
To use your NFL analogy, does the GM over the coach, or is the coach over the GM?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, most of the time it's the GM, depending, unless you're one of these uber successful coaches.
In New England right now, they hired Mike Vrabel, and he's telling the GM what to do.
And he's not uber successful,
No.
but pretty successful head coach. But right now, if you don't have that designated person, and he trusts everybody involved with this, so somebody who is below him gets to make these decisions, whereas if you had a specified person, okay, maybe it's still a collaboration. But I would think appointing this person to do it instead of a group effort would be better.
And I don't think
Right
there
now,
are coaches. Okay, do you think most coaches are still running their programs? Or
Yes.
Bill Belichick is not answering to Michael
No.
Lombardi.
I don't think so
I
anyway.
bet, whoever's at Stanford probably isn't answering to Andrew Luck.
Kirby Smart.
Ohio State's been mentioned to me. Ryan Day, I
Right.
think, probably still calling the shots. So, I mean, that's my thing, is if it's not changing anything about the way you operate on a day-to-day basis. Now, I think there's value in having another voice in the room. If it were me, I would bring in an NFL guy who's managed a salary cap before or been involved in that, and I would have him as part of the discussion. But if you're taking one guy and he's responsible for finding guys in the portal, and you've got one guy who's responsible for negotiating with your current players, keeping them out of the portal and things like that, and you're dividing it up and covering all the bases, that might be the same effect as what people are hoping a GM title would give you.
But see, I go to Chuck's point. If it all sits with your head coach, then when he's preparing to play Ohio State in the playoffs, he's also having to deal with all these other off-the-field issues.
Yeah.
I would have somebody who, coach, he brings in the final white paper and said, here's where we are, instead of the distraction that would come with that.
I just know, and you do too, most of these coaches, you think Nick Saban's going to let somebody tell him?
As I told someone the other
Kirby
day,
Smart is
But-
saying he will not have a GM.
But once again, I think when you get to a certain level, even like you said, in the NFL, Andy Reid's going to make the decisions, not the GM. But I think as you work yourself down the food chain, some of these guys probably have that help, and there are NFL teams where the GM does make the decision.
I see it as, I have no problem with him bringing help. I think he's already looking at it as though he's got help. But let me ask you this. You touched on it. Who's he going to listen to? So let's say Tennessee goes out, and let's say, we got to jump ahead here. So if Josh Heupel says, I don't want a GM, and Danny White looks at it and says, got to have one, do you force Josh Heupel to have a GM? Answer yes or no.
No. If Josh Heupel says, I do not want to have a GM and he's the head of your program, no, I don't force him to do it.
Okay. Let's say he says, okay, I'll acquiesce, we'll do it. And I don't know that he hates it, but we'll just say, it sounds like Kirby Smart ain't doing it.
Right.
But let's just pretend that now in this scenario, Heupel's okay with it, and UT goes and brings in a former UT guy, let's say Reggie McKenzie, who's done stuff. Now that would probably not be the guy, but how much is Josh Heupel going to listen to him? Because he doesn't know him. In terms of his offense, does Josh Heupel hire a lot of guys from outside?
No.
So what's the point unless it's just so? And I see where Ryan's coming from. If you've already got a guy who's one of your underlings, you're in charge of cap. Just take care of it. What's the difference between we're doing that and we're bringing in somebody else who I'm going to say just handle the cap? These are the guys we're after. I don't know. Maybe with somebody who's
But
proven
if you
they got
already
a
have that guy,
Right.
and he's acting like a GM, just go ahead and call
Right,
a
and say,
spade a
here's
spade.
call him a
He's your
GM just to
Right.
quiet the
Right.
people.
I
got no problem with that.
I also think it comes back to this. If you're going to lean heavily on the portal and acquiring players,
Which they don't.
then I think you need a GM. But if that's not your approach, I don't think it's nearly as important to have one.
Here's the exact scenario I've laid out. So say there's a guy in state that Tennessee really wants, and the price is getting a little too high for them. The GM says, we need to walk away. I think the price is too high. If the head coach still thinks at the end of the day, no, I want him, is that really going to be left to the general manager in that situation? I don't think so.
Would a GM have handled the Nico thing differently? There's no way to know, but
It would depend on what he thought of the value.
It seemed like you'd be paying him or you wouldn't.
Yeah,
Same thing as
same
what
thing.
happened.